Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Most Things Hypnosis. I am your host, Ilah Brock, and this is October 21st. Yep, my notes say October 21st, 2021. It's Thursday, live at 5 with Most Things Hypnosis. Today is definitely one of those extra special guest segments. On all things dreams, if you will. My guest, a best-selling author and dream therapy expert, or dream analysis expert, as I think she prefers to be called. And I'll be introducing her in just a few moments. But first, yes, we have my but first segment always, because I got to do something to help everybody. So there are those questions that we ask, that we can ask ourselves, if you will. Oh, hang on, I just lost my place. Forgive me, forgive me. Hang on, hang on. Oh no. See, this is one of those, cut live moments and but we're live, so all the mistakes, they get to stay in. Okay, so there's questions that we can ask ourselves that can really help direct our thoughts and may be headed, that where they may be headed, and can give you a clue where you or we or whatever, where you want to go. In a session with me, I often ask questions to find out what's going on in the client's mind, and I'm also asking questions that seem a little confusing, and I do that on purpose. Purpose. Yeah, it is just strictly water, I promise. I want the mind a little bit in that struggle for answer mode. But why the struggle? Well, it creates the beginning of a breakthrough moment for the person finding the answers to the topic the client wants to discover, uncover, or answer. That is really gross, and I am so sorry you guys had to see that. It's my gum. I should not be chewing gum. My assistant's here, and they forgot to ask me if I had gum in my mouth. I got pointed at. Shame on you. When a decision needs to be made or wants to be made, then what? For example, should I take this job, or is it the right time for me to move out of state, or should I quit my current job, go traveling, start my own business? Is this person toxic in my life, and should I release that relationship? Whenever you're seeking to make a decision, finding an answer to that decision, these are some of the questions that I'm going to share with you, and are a way for you to examine the topic or a point of view for yourself. And that's different than maybe from your own subjective mind and voice in your head. And it makes the response an objective voice. So ask yourself these questions. What will happen if you do, make that decision? If you make whatever. What will happen if you don't make the decision? And the last two questions, what won't happen if you do make the decision? What won't happen if you don't make that decision? So looking at those questions can be, a little confusing, but it does seem confusing, but dive into those answers and really look at the question as a positive response. What won't happen if you do move out of state? What won't happen if you don't move out of state? What will happen, etc. So if you dive into those answers and just keep going with it, you're going to find some answers. The confusion, like I said, is the beginning of that breakthrough, and it aids in your answer to the topic question. Okay, so that's my but first segment for this week, and I hope that helps give you some perspective to consider when making those decisions. Now, on with my show. My guest today is a colleague, and we actually went to hypnotherapy school together. Britt Sheflin has such an amazing soul. Britt Sheflin is a certified hypnotherapist specializing in dream therapy, and is the best-selling author of Human Dreaming: The Dynamics of Dream Interpretation. She can be found on social media at the @ human_dreaming. There's a statement she shared with me yesterday, and I'm going to quote it. I would like the world to know, what if they are not paying attention to their dreams? What are they missing out on? They're missing out on 1/3 of their life. When people treat dreams like they're just a part of the rest and rejuvenation, just part of rest and rejuvenation. I'm sorry, I'm saying this all wrong. Part of rest and rejuvenation. It's like treating eating and drinking as insignificant because all it does is refuel your body. And she's going to share with us a whole bunch of stuff today about dream therapy. So listen fast, and we'll do our best to talk fast. And we may have to have her back. Welcome to my show, Britt. Thank you. It's been quite a while since we chatted.
Yes, thank you, Ilah. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you so much for having me on.
I'm excited too. So let's get right into it. We're going to talk about all things dreams. Um, if I can get my little scroller here to scroll properly. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions up front, and then I'm just going to let you take it over and answer them as your little lecture comes out. What is a dream? Where do they come from? What is dream therapy, and how can it help? Where can it help? I know.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot right off the bat.
I know.
So,
But you have
what
the
is a
answers.
dream? I have several different definitions of dreams, and I feel like everybody else will kind of have the same definitions once I run through it. There's, of course, your sleep dreams, right?
Right.
The thing that we experience every night when we are effectively unconscious, but we are still experiencing life. We can smell, we can taste, we can have sensation. We have emotional experiences above and beyond anything else. And then there are aspirational dreams, right? I like, for example, I am living my dream is a saying that you will hear people talk about. And that would be an aspirational dream. Or, my dream is to get this car or go to this place or to become a doctor. Those are all aspirational dreams that you can think of in your mind and project them into the future. And if you take the right steps, you can usually get to those. And then there's like fantastical dreams, which is a little bit more like daydreaming. So that might be like letting your mind wander and all of a sudden you're flying on the back of a Pegasus over Mount Olympus, right? So probably not likely in the same way that an aspirational dream is, to where you could actually gain that experience in real life. But it's a way of daydreaming creatively and bringing yourself some sort of pleasure or catharsis through using your imagination. So those are the three different ways that I define dreams and what they are.
Where do they come from? Where do dreams come from?
Where do dreams come from? So they come from the subconscious mind, and they are basically the same thing that we experience in waking life, but through through processing. So you're processing things that are going on in your life, and your brain is like a supercomputer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything that you experience throughout the day, at the end of the day, needs to get kind of processed and batched out, right? And so your brain decides what is valuable to keep, what is valuable to use, maybe what seemed insignificant and is not needed in your long-term memory. So it basically processes out anything that is no longer necessary for your long-term memory. And what it decides to keep, it will store in your long-term memory and then play it back to you through the process of dreams.
Awesome. Okay, so, and you have really taken on we both had the same dream therapy class at HMI, but you went like, this really resonated with you. And talking about where they come from now, in dream analysis or dream therapy, if we will, and then we're not psychotherapists here. It's just a term, people don't freak out. But what is actual dream therapy? And then as you're answering that, also maybe throw in, how can it help? Where can it help in a therapeutic sense, like in our job of hypnotherapy or not hypnotherapy?
Yes, absolutely. And that is an important distinction. We are not in any way, shape, or form claiming to be psychotherapists.
Right.
What we do is an adjunct to psychotherapy, and it works really well in conjunction with psychotherapy. I love working with psychologists and psychiatrists, and some of my favorite clients are psychologists, but I am in no way claiming to do the same type of dream therapy that they do. So I guess a better term might be dream hypnotherapy, right?
Dream hypnotherapy. Okay. So
Because
how does,
psychotherapists, they work somewhat with the subconscious, but they're really kind of cognitively trying to get you to create change, whereas what we do is all based in the subconscious.
right, they're behavior studiers, they study the behavior, behavior
Yeah,
changers, if you will, but we work with our emotions and energy. So,
emotions, energy, and also behavior modification
right,
through building new neural pathways
right,
within the subconscious mind.
perfect.
um, and we could get into what exactly the subconscious mind as far as brain structures, but that's like a whole
Whole other,
different conversation.
that'd be another,
So
that's a whole other, let's
that's
save
a
that.
whole other thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. So just for now, breaking it down into the subconscious. So if dreams are what is coming up in our subconscious, one way that you might use dream therapy is if you're having recurring nightmares. That comes up a lot for people. And almost everybody has had a recurring nightmare at some point in their life, right?
recurring means it's more
Recurring.
than once. I mean, I've
Yes.
had about, I can remember 5 dreams. I mean, I'm in my late 50s. I know it's hard to believe, but if I thought about it, I know I've written down 2 or 3 of them in the last 4 years. But those were in the middle of the night terrors, if you will, nightmares. But I don't ever remember dreams in the morning when I wake up.
Yeah. Well, let's definitely come back to your dreams,
Okay.
because I think there's something really interesting there that we should definitely
Look that.
dive into a little bit
Okay.
deeper.
Cool.
Um, so so dream therapy, like how can it help and how is it useful within the
Right.
context of hypnotherapy? So for example, if somebody is having a recurring nightmare, it's very common in children. Um, but whenever you have a recurring dream, it's your subconscious's way of saying, hey, pay attention, I'm still trying to get your attention, you
Mm-hmm.
haven't paid attention to me yet, this is really important, I need you to focus and take care of whatever it is that's trying to tell you. So first of all, paying attention to recurring dreams in
Mm-hmm.
general is very important. But if you have a negative dream or a nightmare and you want to stop it from happening, you would analyze the dream, break it down, figure out what's the dream type, what's the dream subtype, go through the whole process and really have a broad overview of what the dream is and what it is about, right?
Okay.
So that you would take that information and discussing with the hypnotherapist, what are the parts that we want to mitigate, what is the information that we can use, and how can we replace possibly a negative response, a response that's no longer helpful, with a positive one, so that you don't need to keep having these recurring dreams or nightmares every night. And so you might take an element from it and, like, say it's a monster chasing you
Mm-hmm.
every night. So in the hypnotherapy session, you might do something like a systematic desensitization, where you, in hypnosis, walk the person through encountering this monster, and it goes through varying degrees of intensity until you get to the point where there's no longer a negative response to it. It kind of just takes the wind out of the sails of the
Right.
scary thing.
Oh.
And then you would feed it back to where maybe when the monster appears in your dreams now, it's doing something silly, like dancing with the top hat on and spinning a cane,
Right. I
And
gotcha.
so you can basically feed back the same information to the subconscious through hypnosis in order to mitigate any negative experiences and or behaviors.
Okay. Gosh, I'm just writing down so many questions. Okay, so we speaking about the just a recurring dream. So something, maybe not a recurring dream so much as something said, and then that night you dream, like a trigger. You don't realize it was a trigger, and then you dream about something that has nothing, which is one of the dreams that I'm thinking about that I remember, but it's like you something was said, and then all of a sudden you dream about an incident, maybe had nothing to do with what was said, but you know that it had to do with what was said. Somebody's out to get you. Some experience, someone may have had years, decades ago, of somebody getting them, like in a negative way. And now the dream is about which, I mean, I don't even know if I'm making any sense at all. But it was a trigger. So how do triggers, I guess my question is, I mean, is that something that can be helpful, or we just know that that was triggered because of this stimulus, this was triggered, so don't worry about it? Or is there
Yeah,
something more to
no,
it?
knowing where the trigger comes from is super helpful. And a lot of times you will get that. And one of the reasons why I always ask people to write their dreams down is that that is where the keywords and phrases come out. And that's a lot of times where you can find literal information
Okay.
um, about the dream. So, for example, if somebody had a dream that their dog was barking at a squirrel, had chased a squirrel up a tree, but the squirrel had jumped to another tree, but the dog was still barking at the first tree, they might describe the dream as saying, well, my dog was barking up the wrong tree.
Oh,
But in real life, what the literal thing was, and when you break it down, what the dream was about was that they were like trying to maybe date somebody, right?
mm-hmm. Okay.
And they just kept getting pushed off or ghosted, but still kept trying to pursue and pursue, they might be barking up the wrong tree. So that is one way that your
It could be a trigger.
subconscious can use a literal phrase from a trigger and kind of
Awesome.
tell you a little bit more about what the dream is about and how to use it. Did that answer your
I
question?
think so. I like that. No, that's a really good, we'll, if we have time, we're gonna examine that dream. Um, so the question before, as I was walking in the studio tonight, one of the other anchors, he said, can you manifest your own dreams, good or bad?
Yeah,
And
that's
how,
the short answer. Yes, you can.
like, that's the short answer. Like, so if I wanted nothing but positive dreams,
Hmm.
how do I do that?
I don't know if you know, we all live, right? And things happen to us. So I don't know
Right.
if you could only have positive dreams, but there's a couple things that come to mind. One is that that's a big part of lucid dreaming training,
Okay.
is becoming aware of, um, a lot of people first will become aware of their hands or whatever it takes to get you aware that you're actually dreaming, and then being able to participate in the dream and have
Okay.
some level of control over what is going on. So
Oh.
if you start to have a scary dream, then you can recognize you're in the dream and change it to something fun and positive.
Oh, I
So
like that. I
that's
like that.
one way. Another way would be to be really careful about what kind of content you're absorbing, whether it be reading, books or watching, Criminal Minds or something, and especially within the 30 minutes before you go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
uh, just be really careful about what you're taking in, because that, even though those things didn't happen to you and it's just fiction, your subconscious mind doesn't know that. And if you're having an emotional reaction to anything, it's going to be fed back to you in your dreams.
So
So
let's, real quick, since you brought that up, the magic 30 minutes, go ahead and, if you can just tell the viewers, what is that and how does that work?
sure. So the 30 minutes before you go to sleep, before you fall asleep, and the 30 minutes after you wake up are a bit of a magical window where you're still in between sleep and dreams. And so even though it might not always feel like it, it's a time when you're highly suggestible. So you're essentially in hypnosis
Mm-hmm.
during that
Mm-hmm.
period of time.
And those are the
For some
great times.
people, it goes a little quicker, and for some
Mm-hmm.
people a little slower. So,
Right.
that's just a rough estimate.
Right.
But in general, you want to be really careful about what you're doing, because you're going to, in the morning, set yourself up for the day and how you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling and what you're thinking about. And then same thing before you go to sleep, it's going to affect the
Mm-hmm.
content of your dreams, what you're doing right
Right.
before you
Oh,
go
I
to
got
sleep.
it. Nope. Yeah, that was a really good
So
question.
that's
Okay.
two ways. If I may, could we come back to lucid dreams for
Mm-hmm.
one
Please,
moment?
yeah, let's do it.
Um, in my book, I talk a little bit about lucid dreams, and my book really has nothing to do with lucid dreaming, other than that I do recommend doing lucid dreaming training, especially if you have nightmares or recurring nightmares, because you can learn to pull yourself out of it.
Okay.
But unless somebody's having really traumatic sleep because of traumatic dreams, I recommend learning how to actually analyze the information coming from your subconscious before you do lucid dreaming training. because otherwise it's a lot harder to define what your subconscious mind is processing and how to understand your unique subconscious symbology if you don't take the time to actually understand the difference between your conscious thoughts and your subconscious thoughts and how they communicate with each other. Basically, lucid dreaming would be the next step. So just to clarify that, I think lucid dreaming is amazing, but I don't really recommend doing it unless it's an emergency before you understand your actual sleep dreams.
So I think we addressed this. My friend Robert sent a text in asking, do positive statements right before bed, I mean sleep, have an influence in your dreams? Well, not just positive statements, but even negative ones could have an influence in your dreams, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also add that repetition is key there.
Mm-hmm.
So just doing it one night and expecting a change, that might happen for some people, but
For the
I
majority.
would definitely recommend practicing with repetition on that and seeing how your dreams are affected over the course of weeks and months and years.
I mean, I've done little, every time I bring somebody up out of hypnosis, I plug that suggestion about venting in their early morning dreams. And we'll go into the stages here in just a bit. But one client had said, you know, ever since I did that in the first session, he goes, I have these vivid stories that go on now, and they're so beautiful. Every night, something new happens. It's like, well, cool. I'm glad I was able to tap into that. You know, he loves it, you know, kind of thing. So I was like, well, there's an effect. At least somebody can remember their dream, right?
Yeah, well, and that's a really interesting topic too, which is dream recall. And if you are getting about in your life and you have other ways of changing your subconscious associations, like for you, hypnosis and self-hypnosis being accessible to you, that's great. Maybe you don't necessarily need to practice dream recall every night, but I guarantee you that you remembered those 5 dreams that you remembered in your life because they were important.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like two off the top of my head. One like when I was like a little girl, and the other one was in the last 4 years. But I know I wrote down several, the last 2 or 3 of them in a book, but the one we'll talk about in a minute. But let's real quick talk about the different stages of dreaming, from when you start to fall asleep to when you wake up.
Sure. So the very first stage of dreaming is essentially, and it goes through your REM cycle. So any of you who track your sleep dreams, like I have my Fitbit, and I wake up in the morning and I check it and I can see literally how many REM cycles I went through, so I know whether I'm getting quality sleep or not. Typically it's 3. Sometimes if I get a really long night, it'll be 4. But so on average, that's about every 90 minutes or so, you'll start a new, or they last about 90 minutes and you'll have about 3 or 4 a night. So the first REM cycle that you go through is basically sorting. It's sorting out what to keep and what to throw away, right? What stays in your long-term memory as valuable information, what were pertinent events that happened during the day, things that are observable through your subconscious mind, not necessarily your conscious mind. And those will be used in the next 2 to 3 sleep stages. So once you've edited out all the stuff that is not deemed valuable by the subconscious mind, then you move into other processing stages. So the next one, and these are more guidelines rather than scientific hard and fast rules,
Right.
but you generally tend to be processing future and predictive things in the middle of the night. And that's oftentimes why nightmares will happen in the middle of the night instead of right before you wake up, because it's putting you through worst case scenarios for a few different reasons. And it's not always worst case scenarios, but it often is, because it's trying to, your subconscious is trying to prepare you for possibilities that it deems likely. So it takes all of the information that you've stored in your long-term memory since the time you were born through the end of that day, and it puts it all together and comes up with likely scenarios like, oh, you always have the same routine, and my subconscious mind noticed this really sketchy guy who's on the corner every night when I pull into my parking garage, but my conscious mind hasn't noticed him, right? So maybe your subconscious mind is putting that into your dream, like, hey, remember to lock your car. You know, I've
Right.
seen this sketchy guy. There's a lot of break-ins. I'm noticing on all the social media for the neighborhood.
Right.
So
It's all in there.
you need to lock your car. And you might have that dream a few nights in a row. And if you don't pay attention to it, maybe your subconscious mind was a little smarter than you and your car gets broken into
Because
and
you didn't lock it.
you
Nope.
didn't lock it, you know.
Gotcha.
Um, you know,
Okay.
that's just one example
Right.
off the top of my head, but that
Gotcha.
is like what your brain tends to process that type of information in the middle of the night,
Okay. So we had the sorting dream, and then we go into the next state, which is
which is the predictive.
predictive. Gotcha.
Yes. So that's, yeah, that's the REM cycle that we just spoke about, where it's taking all of your long-term memory from birth to present and trying to predict what might happen next. It's basically like Vegas numbers, right? It's a really good bookie, and
Right.
it can really, you know, your subconscious mind is seeing things throughout the day that your conscious mind is not, because you just literally cannot process all of that information at once. So dreams help you do that.
Okay.
Um,
Perfect. And then our next stage of dreaming.
Yeah, so the next stage of dreaming is another form of processing, and that tends to be a little bit more emotional processing, letting go of things from the past that no longer serve you, but also reinforcing new habits, new people in your life, new emotions that you felt, positive new things.
New things.
So you might, for example, have a safety mechanism that protected you when you were a little kid, right? Like disassociating. And now that you've become an adult and you've been going to therapy for years and you've realized that dissociation is no longer helpful, and you've been practicing all of these things that stop you from disassociating, and you have built better habits and tools, you might go through a series of dreams where you're releasing all of that.
Well, that
And
makes
you
sense.
might have these dreams that are intended to release the safety mechanism of disassociation and replace it with something healthier. Once you have done that, you might start having dreams about the new healthy mechanism that you installed in your subconscious mind that is healthier than dissociation, like being more mindful, for example.
Thought that
So the
works.
last stage of dreaming tends to be more emotional processing, getting rid of things and reinforcing new things. So I call that the releasing and reinforcing stage.
Release and reinforce.
Mm-hmm.
And reinforce. Okay, awesome. Oh, so somebody becomes older, like senior citizens, and do they tend to dream less? Do you, in your experience, do you know, or dream more, or is it just varied across the board?
You know, that's an excellent question, and I don't know that I have an answer for that, but I would love to look into it. That's not an
Okay.
angle that I had thought to look at before.
I'm just thinking
Um,
age, because
yeah.
memory, well, the best memory is not as good as the weakest ink. So, and then to remember your dreams,
Yeah.
I keep paper by my bed, but in the event I have a dream in the middle of the night, I'm gonna wake up and put a few notes down
Mm-hmm.
so that I can remember what it is, you know, which doesn't happen very often, hardly ever. So, but I was just curious about if there's any kind of connection between, you know, as you get older, brain cells start to go out and stuff like that, and then people like, I mean, do you even know if there's any information about people who have like Alzheimer's and their brain is starting to shut down and do things it never did before, or more of, or whatever. I have a sister who has late stages of Alzheimer's right now, and what she's doing now is eating voraciously. She has no oral skills. She's now non-ambulatory because she broke her hip. They think she broke her hip because she can't see well anymore, and they don't know how to test her sight because, you know, she's got Alzheimer's. So, and I'm just wondering if there's even any evidence. I mean, there's a certain brainwave pattern when you're dreaming, and I wonder if there's a way to test someone who has.
I would be really surprised if somebody hadn't tested that before, and I would absolutely love to look that up and circle back on that
Okay,
with you.
sure. Oh, yeah.
But
You're coming back on the show again. You know that, right?
Sorry.
You'll be back on the show again, right?
Oh, great. Yeah, I would love
This
to.
is just part one, folks. We got at least two parts, maybe even three, because there's so much to go over. I mean, you should see my notes I got sitting here with all the different questions. Okay, so how can somebody has a dream? So how can hypnosis, if they want, they're talking, they're coming to you and they're seeking some analysis of that dream. Now everyone's language is different. The definitions are different from one person to the next, correct? Of what
Yes.
all the symbolisms and everything that's going on inside the dream. So how can hypnosis help somebody who might be, wanting to either dream more, dream at all, remember their dreams? Because I think everybody dreams whether they remember it or not, as far as I understand. And what would cause
Yeah.
somebody not to remember them at all?
Yeah.
Well, that's a
Well,
good one. What would cause somebody not to remember them?
I mean, how many times throughout your day have you just suddenly realized that you don't remember the last 20 minutes? Like when you're driving, like highway
Right,
hypnosis,
right.
that happens to us when we're awake too. And, it's basically how much importance your subconscious mind puts on dreams, how much recall you have. So you can use your conscious mind to tell your subconscious mind that you think it's more important and that you want to be paying more attention to them.
Oh,
But that not everybody does want that, for various reasons. So it just depends on, like, the same thing as when you're awake. What do you want to pay attention to more? Like, do you care whether you have highway hypnosis as long as you're driving safely? Some
yeah.
people, it might bother them, and some people would really want to be,
Let it go.
like they're happy daydreaming while they're driving. So
Right.
it just kind of depends on what information you place importance
What they're
on.
wanting it. Okay. And then let me talk about triggers. We talked about aspiring. You wrote down all the different kinds of dreaming. I love that. And then, so someone comes to you and they've had a lot of non-reoccurring of the same dream, but just a lot of different nightmares. But they're
Hmm.
always like, if let's say their alarm goes off at 6 in the morning, and they're always happening just before the alarm goes off every night. They go to sleep and their alarm goes off at 6, and they know that their dream is, and it's like what they remember is always never so good in their mind. It's like, oh, that was a nightmare first thing in the morning. I mean,
Yeah.
how would that be counseled? How could a hypnotherapist or dream analysis help that?
Yeah. And I think this is valuable information for psychotherapists as well. I mean, the honest answer is it depends on the person and
Okay.
what their emotional experience of it is. Maybe it's not a recurring dream, but it might have a recurring theme. Or
Oh,
maybe, there's a lot of really happy people that I've met that just tend to have nightmares, and it could just be like an underlying anxiety. So a lot of people have anxiety dreams. There's a lot of different reasons why people might have those kinds of dreams, and it doesn't necessarily reflect upon who they are in their conscious mind and their waking life.
okay. So here's my
That makes
dream.
sense.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you about the dream that I'm remembering, okay? It's
Yes.
coming off the top of my head, but I remember it very vividly. All I remember is I'm in a city, but it's not like, it's like a Gotham kind of city. It's very dark, and I'm in an alley, if you will, but the cars and stuff, and it's brick buildings on either side. And I remember seeing a very bright light on one of the buildings. It kind of lighted the dark alley. It was dark. It lighted the dark alley, and there was a crosswalk. It wasn't a very big street. It was like barely enough room for two cars to get through, so it wasn't a very long street at all. But at a crosswalk, like it turned one way, like a street went down and it disappears. But there's this wall. It's all brick, maybe some windows. Then there's a street that goes down. There's a crosswalk, and then that little street that disappears. But then there's another brick building with windows, and this light, it's just at the top corner of the end of this big brick building, and it's shining down to light it. And I remember it being shiny. The ground was kind of shiny, so maybe it was oil or wet. I don't know. But then I see, I'm like disassociated from it. So I'm watching this happen at the beginning of this. And there's this person in a walker, walking across the street, and identified him as some kind of an old man walking across the street. Now, maybe in a woman, but in my head, I believe it was an old. I remember white hair or some kind of a robe, if you will, but it was dark, and they were shuffling along, kind of like that Tim Conway, when he would do that little shuffle. I don't know if some of you don't remember Tim Conway. He's a hilarious comedian, God rest his soul, but shuffle along. But he just walked real slow, and I was waiting for him forever to get across the street. Oh my gosh, this guy is just not. I was on a bicycle. I remember that. I was on a bicycle. I had to stop. I was going to hit him. If he didn't hurry up. I just remember that. And then the screen in my head changes, and I'm running because this guy on a motorcycle is like chasing me, I think. And he gets off the motorcycle. Now I'm at a building. It's daylight, early morning. And I remembered some green shrubbery. And I remember getting him off his motorcycle. And I'm trying to get away from him. I don't know that he can see me yet. And I see like this retaining wall, maybe 4 feet high. But there's dirt on this side of the wall. Then there's this building right here. And there's this dirt. There's some steps. And he's walking towards me. I hear keys jingling. I just sense him walking towards me. And I'm an adult. And I'm hiding behind this wall because he can't see me if I'm hiding behind the wall. And he came walking through. It's like he stopped. He didn't see me. And then he walked away. And then I woke up. I was like, oh my God, I was crying. I was like hot, sweaty, and crying. But it's now the jingling keys just triggered me to a memory of something from my mother was great at marrying people and divorcing them. Elizabeth Taylor, eat your heart out. But I remember one of her suitors would walk down the hallway in the morning when we were waking up, and he'd jingle his keys. So that might be the jingling. And I didn't like him. He was a bad seed. He was a bad man. But I don't know what the chase was about. I don't know what the motorcycle was about. I don't know why I would be hiding in dirt with the brick wall, or what that alleyway, that Gothamy looking alleyway, and then me on a bicycle not wanting to hit the person. It's late at night. Why are they even out? I was so curious as to what that was about. It was kind of a very strange dream all over the place.
Yeah, definitely.
So ask
Well,
me
the first
questions.
thing to remember is that dreams don't necessarily, they very rarely make logical sense. So that's why they can be difficult to untangle, because we have to come at it from a different angle.
Right.
But first of all, the dream had a bit of a storyline. So my first guess, without reading your written version of it, is that it would be a psychological dream. So my second question would be, what was going on in your life when the dream occurred? Like,
Okay, well, turmoil.
But like, yeah, okay, so turmoil.
So kind of a turmoil. I just started with hypnotherapy sessions with my hypnotherapist.
Okay, so yeah, and I remember you talking about him. Okay.
Yeah, and so Jake, we'll call him Jake because that's his name.
Yeah.
Wonderful hypnotherapist. And so we had a session the day or two before. I put it in my notes, a day or two before about it, and it was about an incident or incidents that happened when I was a little girl. And I was just very matter of fact about it, okay, I was violated and such. And I didn't make a big issue of it because it doesn't emotionally trigger me. And like, I'll talk about it if I need to talk about it, but it's not like something I'm climbed up. But then I had that dream, and that man was chasing me, and that's what came to my mind. It's the only thing I can think of is what the keys just now, while I'm telling you about it. The keys right now are what? Oh, I remember the keys, that dude, that, suitor, we'll call him John, with the keys. So that's probably the keys the key part, that's probably what I remember. I don't know anything about the motorcycle. I don't understand about the motorcycle. I hadn't asked for a divorce yet from my ex-husband. And this has just been last 4.5 years. So it's like weird that this was happening. So I don't know.
So what was the emotion that you were experiencing at the very beginning of the dream? Like when?
Curiosity, very much curiosity. And I think I was frustrated because I didn't want to hit the person while I was on this bicycle.
Okay, so you had curiosity followed by frustration?
Yeah. I didn't want to
Okay.
hit them.
And then followed by
Fear.
fear. Okay. So with psychological dreams, they're almost always about emotions. And some people will say, well, I don't experience emotions or I don't have emotions in my dream. Well, in that case, it would be about like the physical feelings
Okay.
that you're having in your body. So, and for some people, it's a mixture. But essentially, when your dream starts with curiosity and moves into frustration and fear, and those are very like three very clearly defined different emotions, and it's an arc, right? And our brain tends to think in storylines, like we are hardwired to tell stories, and dreams do that very well.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would ask you is, what were you processing then? Maybe you could have been experiencing then, or it could have been from earlier in your life, that started with curiosity, moved to frustration, and then ended with fear.
Well, the fear I would think would have been the incidents that happened when I was a little girl,
Sure.
because I didn't have fear. Also, I was getting ready to ask my now ex-husband for a divorce,
Mm-hmm.
but I hadn't gotten there yet. You know, I was still there with, let's see if we can salvage, blah, blah, blah. And I remember the curiosity was, what is this? Why am I in Gotham City? I hadn't watched Batman, any of the Batmans, in years and years and years. And
Yeah.
that's what it reminded me of. And that
Yeah.
one light, I don't know what that light was about, but it was like whatever my subconscious mind, I'm thinking, it wanted me to see what was going on. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, I don't think it would have had the light there. But that little tiny crosswalk and that little person just slowly walking very slowly. They didn't see me. I'm like coming at them on my bicycle, just 100 miles an hour, really fast. I'm going to hit them. I just know it. And
Yeah.
I don't think I hit them because I don't have any memory of that part. And then it goes right into the motorcycle.
Yeah.
This dude on a
So
motorcycle.
it most of most of what you're talking about is pointing to the present, right?
Oh.
You're an adult.
Mm-hmm.
You had awareness of roughly where you were because you hadn't
Mm-hmm.
watched Batman in
Right.
years, and all of a
Mm.
sudden you're here now,
Right.
and you had a conscious thought of, well, not conscious, a subconscious thought of now.
Mm-hmm.
And the subconscious mind tends to be pretty good with timelines. Like it's one thing that it actually does understand really well is like numbers and time. And so because you were an adult, you were aware of the here and now, that would point to something that you were going through right then.
Oh,
And
I
I would
like
be
that.
willing to bet that there was an incident that happened where you were feeling curious and then frustrated and then fearful. Um,
Huh.
but it might be too long now to remember any specific incidents
Well,
around that
I
time.
wrote everything down, everything I could possibly remember. I'll have to
Yeah.
go back and look at that.
But the
See
keys,
because
that's really an astute observation about the symbolism because the keys were probably symbolic of fear to you.
okay. The keys, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that and it brought back even as we're talking about it. I didn't think about the symbolism of the keys until just now. So there's breakthrough, folks, right here live. But it was like, oh shoot, that he would walk down the hallway and just jingle his keys around. Just that was how he woke us up, all of us kids. You know, it's one of my stepdads. Anyway, but I just but I remember the keys in the dream, and the motorcycles. That hiding. I don't know. Maybe I was hiding from him. I remember hiding with my blanket over my head when he was walking up and down the hallway. Maybe that all had to do with that. I'm wondering now.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it absolutely could be, and it could be over a longer period of time, like, oh, there's a new person around, I'm curious, and then I'm frustrated because I'm not getting attention from my mom, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
annoyed by his frustration, and then fear,
Mm-hmm.
So it could
I'm gonna
be
get hurt.
that you're processing it now. Maybe you had been talking to your therapist or your hypnotherapist about it, and so you had pushed it away. And you also, here's another thing that's really interesting, is you started out as being disassociated, right? Like you
Watching.
were not in your own body until you started on the bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another clue that that you were processing something right then, but it could have been from that time, especially given the symbolism of the keys.
Hmm.
I would have to see it written down
Okay.
to pull out more
Okay. I'll
specific
send it to you.
information,
I'll
but
send it to you. You can put it in your next book.
there you go.
Your sequel, for sure. Let's talk about your book.
Okay.
Okay, tell me what is your book and how can people find it? What's it about and how can it help them?
Great. So my book is called Human Dreaming: The
Yay.
Dynamics of Dream Interpretation.
Yay.
And essentially, I wrote it originally as a manual for myself because there's a lot that goes into breaking down the various aspects of the dream, of any dream.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's dreams are so different, and there's always new things coming up. So it was really a manual for me. In fact, I still leave it next to my bed because sometimes I need to get a good overview of things. So it really is a manual on how to break your dreams down into 7 different categories. And by breaking those dreams down into the categories, you are more able to understand it. So, for example, you have your dream type, which is what we talked about earlier, what you're processing, your sorting dreams, your predictive dreams, or your releasing and reinforcing dreams. Everything that you gather when you analyze a dream is a clue. So again, it's not like a hard and fast scientific rule. It's all clues, and they will all lead you to your own conclusion. And that is another thing that is super important to me, is that the dreamer comes to their own conclusion. I basically give tools and a framework. I don't tell people what their dreams mean to them because that would be incredibly presumptuous of me.
Exactly. Ask
But
questions and let them think.
like you and I did, I listened to what you said. I, tried to figure out what dream type it was, the subtype, pulling out literal and symbolic aspects,
and the
and then
emotions.
figuring out like the broad overview. And then it's really up to you to decide what felt right to you, because you'll know what feels right and what doesn't feel right when I'm bouncing ideas off of you. But essentially, there's the 7 different categories. So you break your dreams down into, again, the dream type, which is the different REM stages of dreaming. And then you have your subtypes. So is it about the present? Is it a dream set in the past? Is it a dream set in the future? Is it a dream set in a parallel world? All of these different things. Is it a nightmare? Is it a very joyful dream? There's all of these different things that can happen in the subtypes that kind of give you more clues as to what you're processing. And then perhaps one of the most important things to identify is whether it is a psychological or a physiological dream. Now, the dream that you and I were just talking about is a psychological dream. It has a through line, an emotional arc, a storyline, right? That's what our brains do really well, is tell stories. We tell ourselves stories all day long, whether we're waking or sleeping.
Right.
But physiological dreams are triggered by many different things, but medications, drugs, low blood sugar is one of the most common triggers of a physiological dream.
Oh.
And the clues that you're having a physiological dream is that if it's a full physiological dream and there are no psychological aspects, it's often you wake up like shaking, sweating, overly emotional, maybe sobbing. You're basically in fight flight, and there's no storyline to the dream. It's just the type of dream that's like looping of a monster chasing you, or you're running in slow motion and you can't get away, or an anxiety dream where your teeth are just falling out, but there's no other anything happening around you. There's not a before and after or a clear storyline or emotional arc. That is your strongest clue that it's a physiological dream.
Okay.
Now, there can be some gray area there, because if you're on medication, it might give you nightmares, or, like when people take malaria drugs, they dream very vividly, and sometimes that can be intense.
Daunting,
so you kind of have to be able to differentiate where you are on the spectrum, like purely physiological, purely psychological, or something.
And your book, Human Dreaming, can actually help you learn to decipher that.
Yes. Yeah. So you have tools to be able to figure out what's what.
Great.
And I know all of this sounds very complicated up front, but once you get it, it kind of becomes second nature, and you only need to refer back on occasion.
That's pretty cool.
So that's step 3. And that's only if you want to do a full analysis of a dream that feels really important to you. You don't have to do this every day.
Okay.
once you have the
Right.
process down. But
Right. It's like, oh,
um,
the same dream,
the
but
fourth step would be to check in with your emotions, like we did with you, which
mhm,
was curiosity, frustration, fear. And you
right.
look at that emotional arc and see if it fits anywhere in your life.
At the time
Um,
that I had the dream.
and if it
Yeah.
feels right to you and you're like, oh yeah, that's what it is, that's probably the incident that you're processing.
Okay.
Um, Now, if it's a predictive dream, that might not be so clear what
Right.
those emotions mean because it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, I
Then you
gotcha.
sort out your literal and your symbolic. So, literal would be like the dream is about you because you're in
Hmm.
it and it's the present day. So, right, you know that it was about you and it was something that you were processing in that present day,
Hmm.
roughly.
Right.
Could have, it had elements from the past, like the keys and stuff, but
Right.
roughly you were centered in the here and
Present.
now
Right.
during the dream. So it'll give you clues like that, like what's literal. And then
Hmm.
you go the symbolic. Oh, the keys, those were symbolic, right? We know now what they were symbolic of.
Hmm.
Now, then you also, if you had written the dream out and I read it, I would have highlighted keywords and phrases, which would have been the things like barking up the wrong tree. They're like cliches or sayings from your culture, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
barking up the wrong tree, we've both heard that before and we know what it means, right? So
Right. Going
it's
out of the way.
a symbolic phrase that you would have in your subconscious. And then finally, I ask people to draw their dream because you can get
Yeah.
further information out of sketching your dream. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece, but I often do stick drawings of my dreams because it will give me clues that I might not have thought of in
Oh, yeah.
language,
That's true.
language.
And
So
that's the last stage,
yeah,
the last phase, the
that's the
last
7 steps. And
seven
actually,
steps.
I also, we didn't talk about this, but I have a journal that accompanies it
Mm.
where it lays it out for you
Oh,
and you can
nice.
just put all of your information in there. And then there's even a space to draw your dream
Oh,
and then
wow.
a place to write the conclusion so that you,
Have a
once
night.
you come to your own conclusion, you are able to have the actual information that you need to take to your therapist or your
To
hypnotherapist or
process.
to deal with yourself.
Got it. Okay. So, real quick, this just came to me. What about people who dream about dying? Do they actually, in their dream dive, obviously they're not dying because it's
Mm-hmm.
a dream, but I've heard people, I get to where I'm almost going to die and then I wake up, or they never actually die. Does that, well, how does that resonate? How does that, what does that tell you? How do you guide them?
Yeah, in my experience with interpreting people's dreams, that is personal symbology.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has different beliefs, like fundamental
Mm-hmm.
beliefs about the nature of life and living and death. And so that's going to be more on the spiritual, which is another dream subtype, right?
Right.
So you can have, some people astral project and some people have very metaphysical experiences and some people are very rooted in reality. And so depending on what your perception of death and dying is, you might have very different experiences of that in your dream life.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, cool. Our time is almost up. I got about another minute or so. Oh, how can people find you? How can they find your book?
Great.
Advertise
Uh,
yourself. Go.
Wonderful. Yes. So I am at www.brittsheflin.com and my name is spelled BRITTSHEFLIN. My
Perfect.
book is Human Dreaming, The Dynamics of Dream Interpretation, and that can be found on Amazon.com, of course. It can be found on Barnes and Noble, and it can also be either present or ordered through your local bookstore if you would like to support them.
Perfect. No, that's great. And you've done well with your sales.
Yes, I have. Yeah. In fact, I stopped selling them on my website because it got to be too much, and I am now redirecting everybody to online and local bookstore sales. So
Awesome. Okay. So they can find your book there. Thank you, Britt, so much for being here. And thank you so much for this information. I know we were kind of all over the place, but it's such an amazing topic there's just so much. Yes, I'm definitely going to have to, we'll chat, we'll get a new schedule, we'll get you in to do a part 2 on this and kind of, now we know where we're going with it, kind of thing,
Yeah.
and see where it's going to
Well,
happen.
I would be delighted to come back and talk to you about dreams anytime.
Oh,
It's
this,
my
yeah.
favorite subject.
It's your favorite subject. Who'd have thunk, huh? Walking into a hypnotherapy school that you would have found your calling in
Oh my
dreams,
gosh.
right?
Yeah, think about that all the time. Serendipity.
Yeah, we have just barely scratched the surface, people. I'm just going to quickly close out with a couple of things. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in this morning, tonight. I'm sorry. Well, maybe you're watching it in the morning somewhere. I don't know. If you're in the Pacific Southeast Asia or something, it's morning there, ish. Night. Yeah, it's morning there. And I hope you're enlightened about dreams a little bit more. I do very little dream therapy in my practice, just because I don't know enough about it, and I have a real hard time remembering dreams anyway. So, but thank you all for tuning in. Now, I want to tell you real quick, next week on my show, Central Valley Talk's own Austin Reed, he is going to be on my show, and I am going to do a live hypnosis demonstration session with him as my victim. Not my victim, my guinea pig. No, as my client. That's it. Yeah, that's my client. It's going to be a lot of fun. He even said he's looking forward to it. Yeah, okay. Well, no, I'm just kidding. It's going to be a lot of fun, just to see what happens. I typically don't do, well, they teach us in hypnotherapy school to do 50-minute sessions, and I did them for a long time, but now my sessions are tending to be a little longer. So he's going to get the typical 50-minute session live right here. I haven't not had any sessions with him whatsoever. So the only thing I'm going to have him do prior to coming out here is the suggestibility questionnaire, and just to help save time because we only have like an hour. So that's my show, everybody. Thank you all for joining me. And I just want you to know now, go do good work and help somebody. And I will see you back next week, and have an amazing weekend. And I look forward to all seeing us again. Take care. Have a good one.
Aqua Nails Spa is the most luxurious nails and spa salon in Fresno and Clovis. Our staff are friendly, courteous, and highly skilled. Come in and let us pamper you. Located at 1398 Shaw Avenue in Clovis, California, on the southwest corner of Shaw and Sunnyside. Also located at 1850 Herndon Avenue, Suite 111 in Clovis, California.